a retreat called Ultimate Leadership. And it's a one-week event out in California, under the sun, under the stars. And when, probably 10 years ago, I was broken, leading a company, successful company, but really empty. And somebody else who loved me very much told me, hey, you need to get away. And here's a brochure of a retreat that put on by this guy named John Townsend. I said, I know John. I read his book, Boundaries, and it's a great book. And so I read it, and at the time, I'm not really a Christian. And I said, well, you know, maybe this is too religious for me. And I read it, and I read the brochure. And at the end of the brochure, they had a picture of people jumping off a yacht into the bay. And so I'm in. I need to get away. I need to do this. So I went to this retreat, and little did I know what God was going to do in this. John and his partner, it was an intensive process group. So I came out bold and ready to go, and at the end of this thing, my heart was open. I was in tears, and I accepted the Lord there as a result of John. Just amazing. Following from that, John and I have gotten together, and I've joined a group called LCP, Leadership Coaching Program, that John leads, and he's led it in California, brought it to Dallas. Steve over there is in it now as well. And John brings a group of high-performing leaders together, doing the same thing that he did in the intensive, but now over a long period of time, a full year. And I've done 2 years of that with John, and it continues to clean out the cup. I continue to get things out, done with guilt. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce John Townsend, Dr. John Townsend. Thanks, buddy.
Hi, guys. Really nice to be here, and thanks, Bob, for the introduction. Great to meet you, Chad. Good friends with guys like Dudley Hall and Steve Farrar. You can't get any better than that. So just really great to be with guys that are speaking to you guys. So really, really fun to be here. I'm going to cough, and when I cough in a microphone, it's really not pretty. So a man's daughter grew up and said, Dad, I've met the man I'm going to marry. And how many of you guys are parents? Well, you know how that's going to feel, or already know how that's going to feel. She says, this guy's great, he's going to marry me. And the dad says, ho, I don't even know this guy. And your mother and I are very concerned about, you know, we raised you in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and we want to make sure that a guy is the right guy for you. So I want to know more. She said, well, Dad, I've already assigned it. There's going to be an appointment tomorrow. He's coming to the house, and you can ask him anything you want. And Dad says, great, because I have some questions. Door knocks. The door knocks. Why do I? There's a knock at the door. And the next day, and the father opens the door, and there's a young man standing there. The young man says, hi, sir, I'm Larry. I want to marry your daughter. He says, come on in here. Have a seat. Larry, nice to meet you. Honestly, I'm sort of stunned by this because my wife and I love our daughter very much, and we don't know you from Adam. And so, honestly, I have some questions for you. Larry says, sir, I'm an open book. Ask anything you want. He says, great. I have 3 questions. Number 1, what do you do? What's your job? What's your career? I have no clue what you do. We want to make sure that our daughter marries somebody who's got some kind of steady foundation. What do you do? Larry says, that's a great question. I don't have a job. Just never was into that thing. The job thing just never worked. Maybe I don't have the gift. But sir, God will provide. Now, when you're around a Christian environment, I've been around Christian environments a long time. When somebody says God will provide, see, that's a double-edged sword. It could go one of 2 ways. Now, when someone says God will provide, sometimes it means you better snap to and listen to it, because if you don't, an angel's going to smite you with a sword. Or it could mean the guy needs medication. You see, it's kind of hard. So it says, okay, Larry, I'll give you a pass on number 1. Here's number 2. What are your assets? We need to know if you've got money in the bank, real estate, stocks, bonds, gold bullion. But my wife and I want to make sure our daughter was somebody's got some foundational assets so life is okay. What are the assets, son? Larry says, I'm really glad you asked. I've got no assets. I don't have a nickel to my name or gold or bullion or real estate or whatever. Just don't. But, sir, God will provide. Now the dad's sweating bullets. Third and last question, Larry. Make it work. What are your goals, dreams, and ambitions? We want to make sure she's with somebody who's got a direction, got traction, is going to take the hill. Goals, dreams, ambitions. Glad you asked, sir. I don't have one goal. Just never thought about that stuff. And dreams and ambitions, just, no, I don't think so. But anyway, sir, everybody one time. So Larry leaves and walks out the door. The dad's sitting there kind of traumatized, right? What's this about? And his wife walks in. She says, well, honey, how'd the interview go with that young man? He says, well, sweetheart, we've got bad news and we got good news. And she says, well, bad news first always. He says, well, honey, there's some bad news. This guy has got no job, no assets, and no goals. And now the wife is traumatized. Oh, my goodness, honey. What on earth? What on earth could the good news be? He goes, sweetheart, there's some good news. He thinks I'm God. Now, for some of that, it's a little closer to home than we would like to think, right? But the fact is that a lot of times we get in trouble in life because there are people in our life that think we're God and that we are the provider of all financial and emotional and spiritual and help. And sort of like we get kind of sucked dry, guys. What we find out is that high-performing men are like a flame and people come like a moth. And they're not bad. The moths aren't bad for being the moths because Jesus said you're always going to have the poor with you. But sometimes we don't know when to say no. And when we don't say no, bad things happen to us because Jesus told us, this is a command. In Matthew 5, he said, let your yes be yes. And what else did he say? Let your no be no. And we have a culture now that says it's okay for a female to say no all the time, but a man with power is emasculated. Do you realize that? We're now in a civilization that emasculates the man. And a man that's confrontive and a man that says no is a mean person. And so what's happened is we've all gotten afraid of our no muscle. We've pulled it back. We don't want to be a mean guy. We don't want to be a harsh guy. And we have really taken away the power that God intended. Let me ask you guys a thought question to get our brains working. I always ask misery questions to my audiences, like, if I can think of some misery stuff, then we'll all change because misery makes us change. In the last 12 months of your life, and some situation where you knew you should have said no or had a hard confrontive talk and you avoided it. You either should have said no to something that you just not was right with you, or you didn't have a tough talk. You avoided a tough talk. And what did it cost you? What did it cost you to avoid saying no? Now, in a group like this, you don't all know each other. I know we're all kind of shame-based, so I got to deal with that. So raise your hand and say, well, I know a guy who has that problem. And pray for my friend, and I'll take good notes. I'll give him the handout. It'll be really. But what did it cost you to not say no when you should have? Anybody? It cost me time. Lots of time. Good. Stress. Lots of stress. Stress increases. When I can't say no, I get under stress. Perspective. A marriage. Okay, there's a guy who understands reality. It cost some of us our marriages. What else? Money. Lots of money. I asked this question to a guy a couple months ago. I was working with a bunch of CEOs. One guy said $2 million. I couldn't say no, and I lost that kind of money. So all across the board, what we're seeing is men are burning out. And men are feeling guilty. And men are feeling disempowered, like it's not good for me to make choices. I've got to give and give and give and give. And if I don't, I'm a bad guy or I'm a mean guy, I'm a selfish guy. And that is not what the Bible teaches. If you don't have the ability to say no, you've got to learn it. Because we need a world of Christian men that can say no and at the same time be full of love and warmth and grace and character. But sometimes a good Christian man has got to draw the line and say, this doesn't work. So my takeaway for our talk is I want you to have some skills. I want you to have some skills to walk away with that you'll know a better way to say no when you need to. Say yes all the time and say no when you need to. And that's what we're going to learn. One of my favorite passages here is in 2 Timothy 2:3, where Paul's talking to a soldier, or he's talking to Timothy, telling him to be a soldier. He says, join me in suffering like a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather tries to please his commanding officer. And what the point there in that Bible verse is that you've got two choices in life, and I've got two choices in life. I can please my commanding officer, that's God, who says you've got a mission, you've got to focus, you've got to raise a family. If you're married, you've got to stay married. If you're not married, you've got to find somebody good. You've got to find out where to put your talents and your gifts and do something on this planet that needs somebody. And if you say no a lot, you'll get that done. Or you can please other people and walk on eggshells and be really afraid of upsetting people and really afraid of other people being disappointed in you. And you will not be pleasing your commanding officer. You'll be a people pleaser. We all have a choice to please God and achieve our mission, or be a people pleaser. You know, the idea is clear. Let's get the skills we need to be a good soldier and follow the mission. Maybe some of you guys' mission is to have a great business. Some of you guys' mission is to have a great family. Some of you guys, you've got a great service organization or a ministry or a 501c3 or whatever. But to do the mission, you're going to have to do a lot of no saying. We want to give you those skills. Does that make any sense? Okay. All right. So first off, God's purpose for boundaries. Basically, God created boundaries for men for a couple of things. A boundary is a property line. It's that line that divides you and the world. Like, if I was to show you your inside, spiritually speaking, there'd be all kinds of stuff inside your skin. There's things like your core values, the values that drive your decisions, God and love and holiness and righteousness and grace. And there'd be your thoughts, your opinions, your feelings, because men have feelings. There'd be your past, your hurts from the past, your sins from the past, your passions, your strengths. And God gave you those things as kind of like your personality. That's your main talent you have to achieve something. One of the first purposes of God's boundary is to protect that, because there is a world that wants to take those away from you. That's where the concept of corporate or businessman's burnout comes from. When we don't protect ourselves, our feelings, our hearts, our thoughts, our values, our time, the world will suck us dry. And so the first purpose is you are accountable to take care of this. I was working with a guy one time, a really, really successful guy, but he was the kind of guy that everybody wanted to be his best friend. Everybody liked him. I wanted to be his best friend. He didn't have time for me, but everybody, you'd have lunch with this guy and they'd say, I need you to mentor me. Can we meet once a week at 6 o'clock? Next lunch. I need you to mentor me. Can we meet once a week at 6 o'clock? I need you to be on my board. I need you to be on my 501c3. I need you to teach in my Sunday school. I need you to be in my committee. There's just guys like that. A high percentage of you guys on a bell curve level are like that. And he was doing everything he could and mentoring and discipling and helping. And finally his wife said, the kids don't know your name. I know, but so many people need my time because I've got these gifts. And so he started working with me. I said, you don't have no boundaries. You're just a wuss. That's a technical psychological term. It's a wuss. And he said, but all these needs. I said, look, a need's not a call, right? There's calling and there's needs. There's always going to be needs, but you don't know what a calling is and you're afraid of letting people down and you're kind of a people pleaser. So he started working on that. And he started telling people he couldn't be there to mentor and help and be on their committees all the time. One time I was reviewing his day and I said, his month, I said, how did it go? He said, well, we had some changes. I said, what happened? He said, well, we're doing the double date. My wife and I are out driving the car to dinner with another couple, nice folks, and the guy goes, you're my kind of guy. I want you to mentor me once a week, 6 o'clock, every Wednesday. And he said, I could feel my wife go into shock, like, here we go. You know, like she'd heard this conversation. He said, I turned to the guy and said, Sam, I really like you too. I love our values. I love what you do. And maybe in about a year I can do that. Now, I said, so how'd that conversation go? He said, well, the guy was a little put off, like, it's a long time. He said, I know, but my plate's really full. I got a family and all this, and, you know, we'll work it out. I said, how was it with your wife? He said, she turned to me and said, thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you don't protect yourself, it will not be protected. That's the first great purpose for boundaries. The second purpose for boundaries is what's called autonomy. And by autonomy, I mean, when you have boundaries, you're free. You guys have to be free to confront evil. You've got to be free to have hard conversations. You've got to be free to say, I know we're business partners, but I've been putting up with this a long time, and maybe it's part of me, but there's a problem in the culture and the attitude. You've got to be able to confront your wife. You've got to confront your kids. You've got to have the autonomy to say that. And men who don't have boundaries have severe problems in making confrontations. In the argument, they always lose. Do you realize that women are better at words than we are? Neurologically, I studied neuroscience. Women are better at verbal things than we are. They use more. They're smarter in that way than we are. We're smarter in some other ways. But a lot of times you can start with a conversation where you've got a problem with the credit card spending, and 15 minutes later you're apologizing. How did it go that way? Because they're ahead of us neurologically. We're always trying to catch up. I try to read one word in the dictionary every day just to keep up. If you have autonomy, there are sometimes you say, I'm really serious about this. This has got to stop. The money issue is not good for us. Or the kid issue, we're off page on the parenting. Or there's a problem with somebody at work. Autonomy means I can confront when I need to. So that's the reasons for these, is to be able to protect yourself and the soul and the heart that God gave you so you can fulfill your mission, and also so you can have autonomy. So, how about in terms of why men need boundaries? There's several reasons why men need boundaries. Did you guys know that men are different than women? Big shock? Yeah. Just a little bit? How are women and men different?
They look better.
They're softer? And they look better? Especially when I look at this crowd, I really understand what you say.
Emotional versus logical.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons. What we're finding out, it's from birth, it's neurological, it's in the DNA. But women have an edge on us in the relational parts of life. They understand feelings and relationships better than we do, you know. Why is my kid acting like a goof? You know, just a goof. And the wife will say, well, he, didn't get put on the baseball team, or the teacher was mean to him, or whatever, and they read things. They have an edge on us in relationship. We have an edge on them in a thing called aggression. By aggression, I don't mean mean aggression and powerful aggression and anger aggression. I mean initiative. We have an engine called initiative that's designed to achieve great things and move ahead and make hard decisions and confront things. We're a tad more aggressive, and they're a tad more relational. But men who don't have good boundaries lose that edge, and we become sort of passive and sort of vanilla, and we kind of forget that we're supposed to have an edge. I don't know a single successful man, and I've worked with guys running billion-dollar companies, who didn't have a certain amount of what we call conflict-free aggression, where they can say something and make it happen, and even if people get upset, they move ahead. As opposed to leadership by consensus. Is everybody happy with me here? No, well, I won't do it. That's just not how buildings get built and companies get made and families get healthy. So you need boundaries because you've got to maintain that aggressive edge. Again, not the mean edge, the assertive initiative-taking edge. And a lot of guys don't have that. They don't feel permission to do that. There's a second reason men need boundaries. Think about how, those of you who said you've got children, how childhood happens and how people grow up. Now, God's plan for childhood is seen in Genesis 2, where the Bible tells us a person shall leave and what? Leave and cleave and move on to their own social system or whatever. A man's supposed to leave and cleave. So the idea of childhood is that we're supposed to have kids and they love us and we nurture them in the admonition of the Lord, and then they get out and they do great things for the kingdom or in business and churches and all these good things. But children are going to leave us. Children are going to leave us. Those of you who've got really small kids are going, I don't want that to happen. When your kids are teenagers, you go, now, when are you leaving? Is it today? It's not today. Okay, you're 14. Okay, is it tomorrow? But God's plans, they're going to leave us. Well, when a little girl is born, she's got a mom, right? And she's supposed to leave that mom. But the next person to help her leave that mom is a great figure, and he's called and Dad is the crowbar to say, I know you guys are best friends, but I'm going to show you there's a big world out there, and I'm tickly, and I'll wrestle with you, and then you'll attach to me, and then you've got siblings to attach to, then you've got schoolmates to attach to, and then you end up working out in the world. That's Genesis 2. Women move from like to unlike. Mom is like me, Dad is unlike me. What in the world is... Yeah, they're cheering, right. Little boys are different. Little boys are going from unlike to like. We've got a mom, we love her, but she's not the same DNA. Who are we moving towards? A dad. He's got whiskers, he's got a deep voice, he's got muscles, he's fun, he wrestles with me, he's like me. So God made it easier for a boy to get out of mom's orbit, to attach to the man, and then siblings, and then church and business, etc. Made it harder for the woman to. So men need boundaries to sometimes give them that extra push, because either we had a mom that couldn't let go very well, we called it the clingy mom, or we had a dad that was somewhat passive, or a dad that was a workaholic, or a dad that struggled, or a dad that couldn't make an emotional connection, a really nice guy, Christian core values, but just couldn't connect. So some men need that extra push to get them out of the orbit of taking care of the mother into the orbit, I've got to feel my strength. That's the second reason. We're just made differently. God made the process of learning to grow up and be powerful and have autonomy differently. All right? So, what I want to do now is to give you a few of the essential skills to have really good boundaries. And when you see this, you can do these. And I try to make these really simple so that men can apply these, because you're all busy, you got things to do, you got business to run, you got families. Let me give you the essential skills, and then we'll see if we've got time for a couple of questions. The first skill to have is to meditate on one of my favorite passages in life. And it's in Galatians chapter 6, verses 2 through 5. Meditate on this passage, I would hope within 48 hours of this meeting, because I believe in the power of the Word. And in Galatians 6, verses 2 through 5, Paul says a couple of things. He says, bear each other's burdens, and thus fulfill the law of Christ. Bear each other's burdens. And then Paul says, each person must bear their own load. Each person must bear their own load. Now, if you look at that in the English, it's sort of like, this is a bummer. You know, wait a minute. I got to bear everybody else's burdens in here and bear my own loads. What is this, the abundant Christian life? I'm getting really tired. But in the Greek, it gets clarified. When it says bear each other's burdens, the word in the Greek for burden means a boulder, a back-breaking, crushing boulder that's really destroying somebody's life. Somebody's going through a divorce. They got a kid on drugs. They just got laid off. Their house went upside down. They got a bad crisis with money. Their wife is sick and they can't find out the diagnosis. That's a burden. And the Bible says for some temporary period, we pick each other up and carry each other. That's how the body of Christ works. Bear each other's burdens. But the verse for pick up your own load is not the same word in the Greek. The word for load there is not a back-breaking burden. You know what it is? It's a knapsack. It's a knapsack. Means to carry your daily provisions of your own life and responsibility. Like when Jesus said, pick up your own cross. It's your knapsack on your cross. Now, if you're a hiker, those of you who are hikers or bikers out here, what goes in your knapsack for a good day trip? You put certain things in your knapsack, right? What? I put water, snacks, sunscreen, a few things like that. And that's my knapsack. It's my problem. I shouldn't tell anybody else you got to carry that for me. There's a big, big difference, guys, between a knapsack and a boulder. But here's the problem. Men don't know the difference. We don't know the difference. So when somebody comes along and they don't like their knapsack, and we're a good Christian man, and they say, you know, I don't like my financial condition. I think that's your problem. And we go, I'm a Christian man. Sure, I'll take your financial problem. It's now my knapsack. And I'll take your kid on drugs. It's now my knapsack. And I'll take your bad marriage. It's now my knapsack. And Christian men start burning out because nobody told them the difference between a burden and a knapsack. Now be honest now, and I've done this myself. I'm guilty of this. How many of you have ever had a miserable person in your life, family or friend, a miserable person, and taken on the project of making a miserable person happy? Raise them high. How many have never done that? You don't know what I'm talking about. This is all Martian, and you haven't. I wish one person had raised their hands, because then we could see what denial looks like. Because we all do it. And as Dr. Phil would say, when you tried to make a miserable person happy and you took on their emotional health as your project, how'd that go for you? Huh? It didn't go good. Say that again. For either. When I try to make a miserable person happy, I'm saying, wait a minute, those feelings that are in your knapsack, now they're my problem? God did not create a structure for me to fix everybody's money, time, kids, marriage, and all that, and it's not good for either. I fail and they fail. Now, I'm supposed to support. I'll tell you something. There's a big difference between being responsible to your brother and responsible for your brother. And men often confuse it. If I'm responsible for my brother, his divorce, his kid on drugs, his money problem, his health problem, it's my problem. If I'm responsible to him, I pray with him. I say, how can I help? Text me anytime. Here's a phone number. Here's a good church I went to. Here's a good doctor I found. Here's a good psychologist I went to. Here's a good men's group. I'll drive you down there. But I've become a conduit, a bridge to what he needs. I am not the source. And too many Christian guys that I work with in business have thought they were the source and not the bridge. You got to switch from responsible for as a source to responsible to as a bridge, and life gets better. So skill number one, meditate on that passage and ask God, where am I taking on a knapsack that I should be a conduit for, that I thought was that person's burden? Because maybe it's not a burden. Maybe I'm just taking something and just taking ownership of something that I shouldn't. Anybody ever heard of codependency? How many of you have read or heard any of the Boundaries material that me and Henry Cloud wrote? Okay. A codependent is somebody that when they jump off a cliff, somebody else's life flashes before their eyes. When we take responsibility for other people and their sins and failings, that's being responsible too. So number one, meditate on that passage. Second question, skill-wise, or second skill is, you need a life team. And let me tell you what a life team is. You can't set boundaries and you can't say no if you don't have support. That's why I believe in Wingmen and all of its affiliates. I'm on the board of directors of the New Canaan Society. They're affiliated with Wingmen. I've been there many years. And I see the power of men bonding together where you really have people on your back and they know everything about you. And when you've got a life team, it's not just about, how's life, how's the kids. It's going into the deep stuff. Like, how are you really feeling? What scares you? What are some losses that you've never grieved? What are some things you feel guilty about? What are some things where you feel ashamed? What about when you're angry or you're terrified? Men have all those feelings, and men that don't access those feelings, they get things like colitis and migraines and back problems and overweight and diabetes and short-term life. We found out that the man who can't touch these deeper things really gets in trouble medically. It's not good for you. If you look at Matthew chapter 23, Jesus said, you got to clean out the cup. That's what Bob Pottisman said. He said he started cleaning out the cup. And so you need a life team where you can clean out the cup. And here's the problem. Your wife is not enough. Your wife is not enough to be your life team. You overwhelm your wife when she's the life team. I have women coming to me all the time and says, hey, he only talks to God and me, and I'm so tired of this. Because he needs somebody besides God and me. Because that's what the Bible says. Ecclesiastes 4, woe to you when there's not another to lift you up. And a life team gives you the love and support and grace to say, I'm with you when you're making these hard choices. Don't do this alone, and don't spiritualize it and say, well, it's just me and Jesus. That's not what the Bible teaches. You got to have a life team. Mine is within 3 and 7 people. I think a minimum of 3. If you've got a good marriage, she's part of it. If you've got a struggling marriage, she's not part of it. She's kind of like till things get better. But you got to have 3 people speaking grace and truth, and grace and truth, and grace and truth in your life, between 3 and 7. Mine are all over the country. I mean, I'd love to say they're all in one group, but you know, I've got 1 in California. No, I got 4 in California, 1 in Dallas, 1 in Indiana, and 1 in North Carolina. Some of them don't know each other. It doesn't matter. But they're on my speed dial, and they're my 3 a.m. calls, and when I've got to clean out my cup, and I'm full of shame, or I've maybe made a bad business decision, or done something in my marriage I'm not happy with, we have the 3 a.m. call, and it goes both ways. You've got to have the life team, okay? That's the second skill. And the third skill is learn to disappoint the right people. Learn to disappoint the right people. Men don't like to disappoint people. How do you feel when you have to say no to somebody and disappoint them? They want you to be on a committee, or they want you to have lunch with them 18 times a year, or they want you to have, coach softball and football and soccer and hockey and blah, blah, blah. And when you have to say no, how do you feel? I feel bad. I feel guilty. I feel like I'm not helping out. I have never met a single successful person who did not disappoint the right people. I'm not talking about disappointing toxic stuff. To say to a bunch of guys like you, now here's the big stance. We're not going to shoot heroin. Man, that's revelation. No more robbing banks, guys. We're done with robbing banks. I mean, we're not supposed to do toxic stuff. That's obvious. Here's where we get in trouble as men. We've got to say no to the good things to have the best things. Say no to the good things so you get to the best things. And that's where you got to disappoint the right people. How's your email box right now? I was working with a CEO. I do a little report card on my CEOs, like how's life, and he pulls out his smartphone and says, I'm doing good. The inbox is empty. I said, well, you're a failure. He goes, what? I need another coach. I said, well, maybe, but you're a failure. But my email box is empty. I'm on top of it. I'm organized. I said, you're living everybody's life. Do you know what email has done to us? Now somebody that I've never met in Zanzibar can tell me that he's got a $50 million prize for me because he's a prince. And if I'll answer him, that I'll get that money. And he's upset with me if I don't answer in how long? What's the email protocol? What do people get ticked out after how many hours? About 24 hours. Who made that up? I told him, you need to have a list in that email box of some people that are nice, but you're disappointing and they're somewhat frustrated with you. Not your core people like your wife and your clients and your accounts and your kids, but some people need to be saying, where are you? And he said, why? I don't like that. I said, well, that's your own OCD. Because I don't know anybody who has not succeeded at very high levels who did not disappoint a few people's wishes for them to have their time and energy. There's nobody I know that said, I kept everybody happy, and I kept the email box empty, and I met my goals. He came back the next month. I said, how's it going? He says, everybody's mad at me. And I said, no. I said, how's your goals? He said, I'm doing great on my goals. Disappoint the right people. Jesus didn't heal everybody in that line. I don't know who that last guy was in line when the disciples said it's time to go, but it happened. If you disappoint the right people with good boundaries, you reach the goal for whatever God has for you, financially, company-wise, family-wise, service-wise, ministry-wise. And the last goal is you must learn to confront in love. Learn to confront in love. Confrontation is a lost art for the male. Every time we confront, I hate watching family television shows on TV. Do you know what they've done to the American father on family television shows? He is an idiot. He's an idiot. Howard Simpson or who? Rayma Romano. The last one that I respected was probably Bill Cosby, where he's a guy, and he's not perfect, but he's respected as a man. And nowadays, we're just a bunch of idiots. So for us to confront, we're mean, we're controlling, we're abusive. Well, certainly you can abuse when that's horrible to abuse. But the Bible has a command, and this is a tough one. This is one of the toughest passages in the Bible. It's Ezekiel chapter 3. And Ezekiel says, if you confront the wicked man in his ways, and he dies in his sin, his blood is not on your hands. Ezekiel 3. If you fail to confront the wicked man in his ways, and he dies in his sins, his blood is on your hands. Men, we have a duty to confront and love our wives and our kids and our friends and our business associates and the people in our churches. And if we don't, and they fail, and they lose money or lose relationships or whatever, we bear some responsibility. So the skill is to learn how to approach people with grace and vulnerability. And I've got this problem too, but I have to explain a problem. We need a solution. And when men learn to confront with grace and be direct and make a habit of it, really, really good things happen. I've worked with entire corporations that were what I called a culture of fear. Everybody had to be positive all the time. Everybody had to be encouraging all the time. If somebody said, you're late 20 minutes to every meeting and you're kind of a traffic jam, well, that's bad, that's abusive, that's like, I had to help them change. It took a year to change the entire culture where truth became normal and truth became welcome and truth became the surgery that we all need. You're not going to get healthy and successful without hearing truth, and your people in your life are not going to get successful and healthy without hearing truth. Ephesians 4 tells us we're supposed to speak the truth in what? In love. Love is the anesthetic that allows us to metabolize the truth. If you love somebody enough, it gives you the relational equity so they can metabolize what you have to say. I remember when my wife and I were first married, we were going through all the young married stuff. The big areas in young marriage are always, there's 5. There's kids, in-laws, money, sex, and spiritual growth, right? If you're wet cement, you have no idea what you're doing. Kids, money, sex, spiritual life, and mother-in-laws or in-laws. So we're working it out, and I'm telling this in public. My wife's fine with this. But she grew up in a family where you couldn't say no. In her family, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And then she marries Dr. Boundaries. What's that about? She's screwed up big time. And so we're working out these early issues, and I got married. I'm not an angry guy. I'm average angry, I guess, whatever, 2.5 times a week or whatever normal is. I don't think I'm abnormal. But I would say, this really bothers me, and she'd say, you don't love me. And I'd go, Till, stop, no, what do you mean I don't love you? You don't love me. What do you mean? Well, it feels like that. I said, well, let's understand that. And what she would say was, look, she's a reflective person, and she said, look, it's like we've got this gallon of love between us, and it's good. I really love who we are. It's good. This gallon's good. And when you get mad, it's like pulling off the bottom of that, and it all falls out. And I don't feel you anymore, and I feel alienated from you. You ever notice that when you guys are getting along, it's great, and then when you get mad, where'd you go? It's because she feels like all the love has leached out of the bottom of that gallon. And I said, well, that we can't have that. That's going to be bad for us. So I need to know from you how I can tell you the truth when I'm bugged, and you still feel that I care, because we got 50 years ahead of us, God willing. And she's a reflective person. She said. She thought about it. She said, reassure me. Reassure me that you care. And I think that might help. And I said, great idea. So when we were in those early years, I would say, before we talked about the big 5, I'd say, hey, you're it for me. You're the moon who hung my stars, and I'm your biggest cheerleader, and I'm really for you and us. And we have this issue. And it went really well. And she gave it back to me, and we could have the tough conversations. I'll never forget the day we've been doing this habit for a while, because I'm a habit person. And I walked in the living room, and I had something. I think it was a credit card problem. Guys can't relate to that. I said, listen, you're it. You are the one. And I'm so glad that we're together. And I started to go into my spiel. She goes, Just get to it. Now, let me interpret just get to it. What do you think she was saying by just get to it? Well, yeah, she was saying, we've done a lot of work. We've knitted that bottom together. We've worked hard at making sure that I know that you are steady and you're for me forever. And now when you're bugged and I'm bugged, it doesn't leach out. It's still there. Learn to confront. Learn to confront as a man, directly, with no shame and no guilt, and with the truth. And things happen. So, I don't know how to tell you this. I love what Chad was saying when he started. We desperately need male, strong Christian men who can love well and grow well and relate to their wives and relate to their kids. And I always think about that passage in Matthew where Jesus said, the gates of hell, the very gates of hell, will not stand up against a church like this. So be encouraged and be somewhat challenged to have better boundaries this week.
Thanks for your support of Wingmen Ministries. We would love to hear your comments about today's show and help you get connected with other men in your local area. To keep up to date on upcoming events, element groups, and speakers, please visit our website at wingman.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our email list.